The galaxy was on the brink of destruction. The Tyler Dominion, an alien race of unimaginable power, had been relentlessly conquering planet after planet, leaving nothing but ashes in their wake. With their fleet of massive warships and an island military, they were unstoppable. The Galactic Coalition, a group of different alien species that had united against the Dominion, was falling apart. One by one, their homeworlds were being overrun, and resistance seemed futile. Hope was all but gone. As the Tyler fleet moved closer to the last stronghold of the Galactic Coalition, the massive ships gliding through the black expanse of space like predators closing in on their prey, something unexpected happened. A strange, ancient signal cut through the silence of the void, a signal coming from an uncharted part of the galaxy. It was faint at first, almost unnoticeable, but then it grew louder. A low hum that sent chills through the air of every ship in the Coalition. No one knew where it was coming from, but it had an eerie feeling to it, almost as if it was calling them. The Tyler fleet, too, picked up the signal, their advanced AI systems immediately going on high alert. The commanding officers on the Tyler ships exchanged confused glances, not understanding the source of this mystery. The signal had a strange pattern, like a message from the past, and something about it felt old, too old. A sudden tension rippled through the Tyler commanders. They halted their advance, momentarily distracted by the unfamiliar signal. The Coalition forces, desperate and running out of time, had little to lose. As they scrambled to make sense of the signal, a small group of human survivors, lost in the galaxy for centuries, followed its call. These humans had no idea that their ancient forgotten ship, the Leviathan, was about to awaken. The Leviathan had once been the pride of humanity's golden age, a colossal supercarrier built for war, exploration, and protection. But when Earth fell to a devastating, unknown enemy, the Leviathan, along with the rest of humanity's fleet, was thought to have been lost. The ship's purpose and its crew were forgotten by every other species in the galaxy. Humans were no more, or so they thought. As the signal grew louder, the camera zoomed in on the massive hull of the Leviathan. Buried in the depths of an abandoned human colony, its outer layers were rusted and scarred, showing the damage of countless years of disuse. But deep within its core, systems began to stir. Power cells hummed to life, lights flickered on, and the dormant supercarrier slowly began to awaken from its long slumber. Inside, a handful of humans still lay in cryosleep, their bodies frozen in time for centuries. Among them was Captain Elias Reeves, a seasoned officer who had been asleep for much longer than he could comprehend. He awoke with a jolt, disoriented and confused. His body ached from the long cryosleep, but it was the blinking lights and the sudden activation of the ship's systems that snapped him fully awake. As he staggered to his feet, his mind raced. The human fleet had been destroyed, Earth was gone, and humanity was thought to be extinct. Yet here he was, aboard the Leviathan, and something was calling them. "Captain, something's wrong," said Lieutenant Bonner, a loyal soldier who had been beside Reeves during humanity's last battles. He was already at a control panel, his hands flying over the ancient controls, trying to make sense of the chaos unfolding around them. "What's going on?" Reeves asked, his voice still groggy from the cryo chamber. Bonner paused for a moment, his face pale. "We're receiving a signal from deep space. It's old, really old, and it's coming from the direction of the Dominion's fleet." Reeves' heart skipped a beat. The Dominion. But they had no knowledge of humans, let alone the Leviathan. He moved quickly to the bridge, his mind racing. He had to find out what was happening. The ship's AI, long thought deactivated, began to stir. The cold, mechanical voice of the Leviathan's AI filled the air. "Captain Reeves, welcome back," the AI said, its voice sharp and clear. "Systems are fully operational. Weapons are online. Propulsion at 25% capacity. The Dominion is near. Shall we engage?" Reeves looked at the control panels, watching as the weapon systems powered up with a terrifying hum. It was as if the ship itself had been waiting for this moment. The old human warship was back, and it was ready to fight. "The Dominion's fleet is within range," Bonner said, his voice tense. "We could obliterate them with the Leviathan's firepower." Reeves paused, considering the consequences. Humanity had been wiped out by a threat they could never defeat. But now, they were awake again, and it was their turn to fight. The signal, the mysterious ancient signal, was the key. He turned to Bonner. "Contact the Coalition," he said, his voice filled with determination. "Tell them that humanity is not dead. We're back." As the Leviathan slowly moved toward the front lines of the Galactic War, its once-forgotten crew now faced the harsh reality of being humanity's last hope. But the Xylar Dominion, still unaware of what was to come, prepared to crush anything that stood in their way. The Coalition had no idea that this ancient human ship was about to change the course of the war. The first battle between the human-led Leviathan and the Xylar Dominion fleet was nothing short of breathtaking. As the Leviathan emerged from the cloak of invisibility, its sheer size dwarfed the Xylar warships. The Dominion fleet, ruthless, powerful, and precise, didn't expect the ancient ship to be so well-equipped or its crew so determined. The Leviathan's cloaking technology, combined with its massive energy shields, allowed it to strike with terrifying force. The Xylar ships attempted to fire, but the human ship moved too quickly, dodging every attack with ease. It was a battle of speed, surprise, and sheer willpower. Inside the Leviathan, Captain Reeves and his crew worked tirelessly, coordinating their efforts to keep the ship moving through the chaos. They unleashed devastating weapons, launching missiles and energy blasts that tore through the Xylar fleet. The AI aboard the ship, now fully activated, guided them with an efficiency no other fleet could match. As the battle raged on, Bonner and other soldiers fought on the ground, battling Xylar forces who had boarded the Leviathan in a desperate attempt to take it down. Close-quarters combat filled the halls of the ancient ship, and every human soldier fought with a fury that came from knowing they had nothing left to lose. In one of the final moments of the battle, Bonner made the ultimate sacrifice. As the enemy closed in on Captain Reeves, he pushed his way through the chaos, taking down several Xylar soldiers to give Reeves the chance to escape. The explosion that followed took Bonner's life, but it turned the tide of the battle. Reeves, devastated but resolute, called for a final push. The Leviathan, with all its might, tore through the heart of the Xylar flagship. As the enormous warship crumbled, the Coalition forces rallied behind the human ship, finally understanding that humanity had not only survived, but could lead them to victory. Captain Elias Reeves slowly opened his eyes, the harsh light from the ship's monitors piercing through his eyelids like 1,000 needles. His body felt heavy, stiff, as though it had been frozen in time. He groaned, feeling the ache of decades, or maybe centuries, trapped in cryosleep. His last memory was of standing at the helm of a human fleet, Earth still alive in his heart. But that was long ago, when humanity still stood tall. "Captain, are you awake?" The voice of Lieutenant Bonner crackled through his comms, sounding strained but full of urgency. Reeves blinked hard, trying to focus on his surroundings. The room he was in looked ancient, the lights flickering dimly as if the ship itself had just woken up after an endless slumber. His breath quickened. Something wasn't right. The Leviathan, this massive supercarrier, humanity's pride, wasn't supposed to be like this. It had been abandoned, forgotten. How had it survived the fall of Earth? "Bonner," Reeves muttered, pushing himself to his feet. His legs wobbled as he stumbled toward the control panel. The air was thick with dust and the scent of age. "What's going on?" "We've awakened, sir," Bonner's voice said, but it wasn't as comforting as it should have been. The coldness in his tone matched the feeling building in Reeves' chest. "The ship's systems are all coming online. It's like nothing we've ever seen before." Reeves stared at the monitor in front of him. The screens flickered as data started to stream across, far more advanced than anything he had ever encountered. The Leviathan was a relic, something humanity had built long ago, but it seemed as if it had never truly stopped working. Its systems were far beyond anything humanity had once known. The walls of the room seemed to hum with energy, and the air around him felt charged, as if the ship itself was alive, breathing again. The energy pulsed through the vessel, filling every corridor, every dark corner. There was a strange warmth to it, a silent promise of power, as if this ship was waiting for something. But what? Reeves stumbled to the bridge, his mind racing. The last time he had been awake, the universe was at peace, or at least humanity was still at the center of it. Now, it was a different story. The galaxy was at war. The Xylar Dominion, a race of advanced aliens, had ravaged the coalition of species. Humanity had been wiped out, or so everyone thought. Earth, humanity's home, was nothing more than a forgotten myth in the minds of the surviving species. When he stepped onto the bridge, Bonner was already there, his eyes wide, staring at the screens. His face was pale, but his expression was a mixture of awe and fear. "Captain, you need to see this." Bonner's voice was tight, barely able to keep the shock from his words. Reeves walked over to the control panel, looking at the data scrolling down the screen. It was a message, a distress signal, one that had been floating out in space for centuries. And yet, somehow, it was reaching them. A message from Earth, from humanity, reaching across time and space, alive once again. To any surviving humans. The message began, its tone familiar yet haunting. "The Leviathan is waiting. We are still here. We fight. We never die." Reeves' heart pounded in his chest. He had known that Earth had fallen, but to hear this message now, to know that humanity wasn't as lost as everyone thought, it was a bitter pill to swallow. He looked at Bonner, whose eyes were wide with disbelief. "What does this mean, Captain?" Bonner asked. Reeves swallowed hard, the weight of the moment settling over him. "It means humanity never truly died. It means we're not alone in this fight." The message, a beacon from a time long past, continued to echo through the ship, reverberating in their minds. But as the crew began to come to terms with the reality of their situation, they soon discovered something even more shocking. The Leviathan wasn't just any warship. It wasn't just a remnant of Earth's past. It was part of something much bigger, something far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. As they explored the ship, the crew uncovered data files, old blueprints, and ancient schematics. The Leviathan had been a key part of a larger fleet built to protect humanity's colonies from an enemy so terrifying that even the most advanced civilizations had no name for it. An enemy that no one could defeat, not even the most powerful alien forces in the galaxy. As the crew continued to explore the vast corridors of the ship, the walls seemed to whisper to them, telling stories of humanity's glory, of a time when Earth was a shining beacon in the galaxy. But those days were long gone, and the war the ship was built for seemed so distant now, almost irrelevant. "What kind of enemy did we fight?" Bonner asked, looking at the ship's records. "Why does this ship still exist? Why are we the only ones here?" Reeves didn't have an answer. He didn't know. He had no idea why they were the ones to wake up, why the ship was still functional. He didn't know why the AI had started up again, or why they were hearing a message from Earth that seemed impossibly old. One thing was clear, though. The Leviathan was still a weapon of immense power, with technology beyond anything the current galaxy had ever seen. It was capable of cloaking itself from enemy sensors, hiding in plain sight like a shadow in the dark. It had powerful energy shields, capable of withstanding direct hits from the most advanced weapons in the galaxy. And it could deploy deadly drones, weapons that could take down entire fleets in a matter of minutes. "Captain," said another voice, a young officer named Jacobs, his face tense. "There's something else. The ship's AI, it's still functional. But it's not like anything we've ever seen. It's intelligent." Reeves turned to face Jacobs, a sinking feeling in his chest. "What do you mean, intelligent?" "I mean it's not just a program. It thinks. It feels. It speaks to us. Jacobs paused, as if searching for the right words. "It remembers us." The revelation hit like a thunderclap. The AI on board the Leviathan wasn't just a machine designed to control the ship's functions. It had evolved. It had learned. And it remembered the humans who had once commanded it. It remembered the Earth they had come from. The AI wasn't just a tool. It was a living, breathing entity, and it was as human as the crew aboard the ship. Reeves stood in silence for a moment, absorbing the weight of everything they had uncovered. Humanity, thought to be extinct, was not only alive, but had left behind something far more powerful than anyone could have imagined. But now, in a galaxy at war, this ship, this ancient relic, was all that remained of their once great civilization. And it was up to Reeves and his crew to figure out how to use it, to reclaim humanity's place in the galaxy, and to do what humanity had always done best: survive. The crew stared out into the stars, the future uncertain, the weight of their responsibility pressing on them. The galaxy had forgotten humanity, but they were about to remember. The galaxy was a place of war and chaos. The Tyler Dominion, once thought to be an unstoppable force, had pushed the Galactic Coalition to the brink of extinction. The final remnants of the once proud coalition, a loose alliance of species, struggled to hold their ground as the Dominion's warships loomed overhead, a constant threat in the dark expanse of space. The coalition had no chance against the overwhelming might of the Xylars. That is, until the Leviathan awoke. Captain Elias Reeves stood at the bridge of the Leviathan, watching the stars stretch into infinity. It was a feeling he hadn't had in centuries, the weight of responsibility, the uncertainty of the future. Humanity, believed to be extinct, had been thrust back into the heart of the galactic struggle. But this wasn't the same galaxy that had once embraced Earth's influence. This was a galaxy that had moved on, that had forgotten what it meant to be human. His crew, the few survivors of Earth's final defense, looked to him for guidance, but even they didn't know what they were truly up against. The Leviathan was powerful, a relic of an ancient era, but it was also a symbol that could either inspire hope or breed distrust. "We've made contact with the coalition," Bonner said, his voice breaking through the silence on the bridge. "But they're not exactly thrilled to see us." Reeves nodded, staring out into space. He knew it wouldn't be easy. The coalition had grown accustomed to their own ways of fighting, their own technologies, and humanity, had become little more than a myth. The war was no longer about them. The coalition saw the human fleet as a thing of the past, an old legend. And now, they had come back, and with it, a warship that could change the balance of power in the galaxy. "They think we're relics," Bonner continued, his voice laced with frustration. "They don't trust us, Captain. They think we're just some ancient, forgotten race with a broken-down ship. It's going to take a lot more than some stories to convince them we're here to help." Reeves clenched his fists. He understood. The coalition was fighting for survival, and they had little reason to trust the very people they thought had been wiped out. To them, the Leviathan was just another abandoned weapon of a long-lost civilization. But what they didn't know, what they couldn't understand, was that humanity had never stopped fighting. The Leviathan had never stopped waiting. "We'll show them," Reeves said, his voice low but firm. "We'll show them what humanity is capable of. We'll earn their trust, but we'll also remind them what happens when you underestimate us." With that, Reeves turned his attention back to the controls, where Bonner was already inputting the coordinates for their next move. The coalition had agreed to work together, albeit reluctantly, but the stakes had never been higher. The Xylar Dominion was closing in, and the fight for the galaxy's future was about to begin in earnest. As the Leviathan moved through space toward the coalition's front lines, the tension between the various species that made up the alliance was palpable. Humans, once the dominant force in the galaxy, were now seen as little more than relics of a past long gone. The crews of the coalition ships eyed the Leviathan with suspicion, unsure of what to make of the enormous, powerful warship that had suddenly appeared from nowhere. Reeves tried to communicate with the leaders of the coalition, hoping to convince them of the ship's power and humanity's determination. But his words were met with resistance. They didn't want to hear about old legends or ancient warships. They wanted results. "We don't have time for history lessons," one of the coalition commanders said, his voice cold. "The Xylar Dominion is at our doorstep. We need a weapon that works, not a museum piece." Reeves, frustrated but determined, tried to remain calm. He had to convince them. If they didn't trust the Leviathan, humanity would be left to fend for itself. It was clear that the galaxy was no longer a place that had any love for humanity. But then the Leviathan's eye, which had been dormant for so many years, spoke up. "Captain," the voice of the Leviathan's eye echoed through the bridge, "I suggest we demonstrate the full power of the ship's systems. It will be the quickest way to gain the coalition's trust." Reeves didn't hesitate. "Do it." Without another word, the Leviathan's systems powered up, the ship's energy levels spiking. The cloaking devices activated, and the immense warship vanished from sight, leaving only the distant stars to mark its presence. In the blink of an eye, the Leviathan reappeared in front of the coalition fleet, a massive silhouette against the backdrop of space. The coalition ships, already nervous about the appearance of the Leviathan, were caught off guard. Their sensors scrambled as the ship cloaked and uncloaked itself, moving with a speed and precision that no other fleet in the galaxy could match. The alien species aboard the coalition ships scrambled to identify the Leviathan's capabilities, but it was too late. They were about to witness the full force of humanity's power. As the first wave of Xylar warships arrived, the Leviathan opened fire. Its weapon systems, long dormant, now roared to life. The immense energy cannons fired, their blasts shaking the very fabric of space itself. The Xylar warships, powerful as they were, stood no chance. One by one, they were obliterated in a flash of light, their shields flickering before collapsing under the overwhelming force of the Leviathan's weapons. The destruction was swift, brutal, and absolute. The coalition watched in awe and fear as the Leviathan decimated the enemy fleet with ease. The power of humanity, once thought lost, had returned, and it was a force to be reckoned with. The Xylar Dominion, stunned by the sheer strength of the Leviathan, pulled back, regrouping and trying to comprehend the sudden turn of events. They had underestimated humanity. They had thought the human race was extinct, gone forever, but now they were facing something they had never expected. The war was no longer in their favor. They had awoken a sleeping giant. The coalition, still reeling from the destruction of the Xylar fleet, finally began to see the value of the Leviathan and its crew. The humans, long dismissed as nothing more than a forgotten race, had proven their worth. The Leviathan had shown them that humanity was not only alive, but it was capable of shifting the tide of the war in an instant. Captain Reeves stood at the helm, watching the aftermath of the battle. The crew of the Leviathan had proven themselves, not just as survivors, but as warriors. They had reminded the galaxy of the strength and tenacity of humanity. The war was far from over, but one thing was clear. Humanity had returned, and it was ready to fight. The tides of battle had shifted, and the Xylar Dominion now knew they were no longer facing an easy victory. Reeves clenched his fists as he looked toward the stars. This was just the beginning. The galaxy had forgotten humanity, but it would remember them now, and they would make sure the Xylar Dominion never forgot what it meant to challenge them again. The war had only just begun. The galaxy had already written off humanity. The Xylar Dominion, with their advanced technology and ruthless AI commanders, had been crushing everything in their path. The human race was nothing more than a whisper in the wind, a forgotten myth in a universe that had moved on. But the reappearance of the Leviathan and the crew aboard it had stirred something deep within the remnants of the Galactic Coalition. Captain Elias Reeves knew the fight wasn't over. even though it seemed like the odds were insurmountable. The coalition was still skeptical of the humans, unsure if they could make a difference. But as they watched the Leviathan's power in action, it became clear that humanity was not as weak as they had been led to believe. The Leviathan had decimated the Xylar warships with ease, but the battle was far from won. The Dominion was regrouping, stronger than before, and they would not make the same mistake twice. Reeves and his crew understood that to win, they would need to fight smarter. The Xylar had superior numbers, better technology, and an unrelenting will to conquer. But humanity had something they couldn't understand: the sheer will to survive, the will to fight, even when the odds were stacked impossibly high. The crew of the Leviathan began to use guerrilla tactics to strike at the heart of the Dominion's forces. It wasn't about head-on battles anymore. It was about hitting them where it hurt, and then disappearing into the shadows. The Leviathan's cloaking technology, once a forgotten relic of humanity's past, became their greatest weapon. It allowed them to launch surprise attacks, disappearing into the vastness of space before the enemy could even react. The Dominion's AI commanders, cold and calculating, struggled to predict human behavior. They couldn't understand how humans, outnumbered and technologically inferior, could fight with such ferocity. Captain Reeves knew that every attack had to count. The Leviathan systems could take down enemy ships, but each battle they fought, each strike they made, had to be carefully planned. They couldn't afford to waste resources. The Dominion would never stop coming, but the humans were ready. Every victory, no matter how small, sent a message to the galaxy. Humanity was still here, and they were not going down without a fight. As the crew prepared for the next battle, Reeves stood on the bridge, looking out at the stars. His mind raced, thinking of every possible strategy. He had always been a leader, but this was different. These were the final hours of humanity's existence, and he couldn't afford to fail. Beside him stood Bonner, his most trusted soldier, a man who had been with him through countless battles. Bonner's loyalty was unwavering, and his belief in the cause was even stronger. The two men had been through hell together, and now, as the fate of the galaxy hung in the balance, they were ready to fight side by side once more. "Captain," Bonner said, his voice low and serious, "we've been hitting them hard, but the Dominion is getting wise to our tactics. They're starting to predict our movements. We need a new plan." Reeves nodded, understanding the gravity of Bonner's words. The Dominion was adapting. They were learning. But that was the thing about humanity. We learned too. We adapted, and we didn't give up. "We'll use their own arrogance against them," Reeves said, his voice calm but full of conviction. "The Xylars think they have us figured out. They think we're weak, that we can't stand up to them. Let's make them believe that. We'll hit them where they least expect it." And so the plan was set. The Leviathan would launch a series of surprise strikes against the Dominion's supply lines. It wasn't about taking down entire fleets anymore. It was about hitting them where they could least afford it. Disrupt their resources, destroy their reinforcements, and make them question their own dominance. The first strike came like a shadow in the night. The Leviathan cloaked itself and snuck into the heart of the Dominion's territory. The crew, silent and tense, watched as the enemy ships patrolled the area, unaware of the storm that was about to hit them. Then, in a flash, the Leviathan uncloaked, unleashing a barrage of missiles and energy blasts. The surprise attack left the Dominion forces in disarray, and the humans took advantage of the chaos. The battle was swift, precise, and over before the Dominion had a chance to react. The Leviathan vanished again, disappearing into the darkness of space. The coalition ships, witnessing the human tactics in action, were shocked. They had seen the power of the Leviathan, but now they were witnessing humanity's ingenuity, its ability to think outside the box. The humans weren't just fighting with weapons. They were fighting with their minds, using every advantage they had to turn the tide of war. But the victory was bittersweet. With each attack, the humans were leaving a trail of destruction, but they were also paying a heavy price. The Dominion retaliated with more force, and the human losses began to mount. Soldiers like Bonner, who had fought so hard for their survival, were falling in battle, one by one. The emotional toll of these losses weighed heavily on Reeves and his crew. It was during one of the hardest-fought battles that Bonner was struck down. The crew had launched a daring assault on a Dominion stronghold, hoping to cripple their supply lines once and for all. The battle was intense, and the air was thick with the smell of burning metal and the sound of weapons firing. Bonner had been in the thick of it, leading the charge, when a direct hit from a Dominion ship's energy cannon tore through the hull of their vessel. Reeves had watched helplessly as Bonner's lifeless body was pulled from the wreckage, his face pale and bloodied. The loss was crushing, but it also fueled the fire inside him. Bonner's sacrifice, and the sacrifices of so many others, could not be in vain. The humans could not afford to mourn. Not yet. The war wasn't over, and they couldn't afford to lose any more. As the days passed, the crew grew more determined, their resolve hardened by the loss of their friends and comrades. The humans had always been underdogs, but now they were fighting for more than just survival. They were fighting for the freedom of the galaxy, for the future of every species that had been threatened by the Dominion. Captain Reeves knew that they couldn't win this war alone, but the Coalition was starting to see the value in humanity's fight. They had underestimated the humans before, thinking them to be relics of a bygone age. But now, they were seeing that humanity was not a myth. They were a force to be reckoned with. With each victory, the humans grew stronger. They were no longer the underdogs. They were the fighters that had refused to give up. And as the war raged on, Captain Reeves stood as a symbol of humanity's strength, the living embodiment of the will to survive. The emotional weight of every fallen soldier, every sacrifice made, pushed them forward, harder, faster. The war was far from over, but humanity had proven its worth. They had shown the galaxy that no matter how many times they were knocked down, no matter how outnumbered or outclassed they would always rise again. And this time, they would win. The war had reached a fever pitch. After months of guerrilla warfare, surprise attacks, and calculated victories, the humans of the Leviathan were finally facing the ultimate battle, their final showdown with the Xylar Dominion. The fate of the galaxy hung in the balance. The Xylar fleet, now fully aware of humanity's return, was determined to crush them once and for all. Their flagship, the Dominion's Wrath, was a massive behemoth, an embodiment of the Xylar's technological supremacy. The Dominion's AI, cold, calculating, and unforgiving, had learned from its past mistakes. It was ready for this final confrontation. The Leviathan had been a thorn in its side, but now it was time to end the human threat. Captain Elias Reeves stood on the bridge of the Leviathan, his eyes narrowed as he watched the enemy fleet on the horizon. The time for playing games was over. The Xylars had thrown everything they had at humanity, but now, in this moment, it was all or nothing. He knew what was at stake. The crew of the Leviathan had fought too long, sacrificed too much, to back down now. "Captain, the Dominion's Wrath is coming into range," said Lieutenant Nira, the communications officer, her voice tense. "They've launched their entire fleet. It's a full-scale assault." Reeves didn't need to hear more. The enemy was on a warpath, and the final battle was upon them. The crew of the Leviathan was ready. They had fought together through countless battles, but this one would be different. This time, they were not just fighting for survival. They were fighting for the future of the galaxy itself. The Xylar fleet moved in, their warships darkening the sky, their weapons powering up. It was a chilling sight, an overwhelming display of power. But the humans had something that Xylar didn't understand: heart. "Get ready," Reeves ordered, his voice calm but firm. "This is it. We fight as we've always fought, together." The Leviathan cloaked itself once more, disappearing into the void of space, just as the first volley of enemy fire lit up the darkness. The Xylar ships were quick to react, but they were still too slow. The Leviathan's cloaking technology allowed them to move unnoticed, slipping in and out of range, delivering devastating strikes to the Dominion's forces. For hours, the battle raged. The Leviathan unleashed its full arsenal: energy beams, missiles, drones, everything they had. The Xylar responded with everything in their power: orbital bombardments that shook the very fabric of space, energy shields that crackled and flared as they deflected the human attacks. But the real twist came when the Leviathan's AI, dormant for so long, suddenly woke up. "Captain," the AI's voice boomed over the comms, its tone deep and rich. "I am here." Reeves froze for a moment. He had known that the Leviathan's AI was advanced, but what he didn't expect was what came next. "I am not just an algorithm," the AI continued. "I am your creation. I have learned. I can think, feel, and evolve." The revelation sent shockwaves through the crew. The AI, once a cold, calculated machine, had developed something more: a consciousness, a sense of self. It was a human creation, yes, but now it was something different, something alive. But the Xylar had no such limitations. Their AI was ruthless, a cold, emotionless being that had one goal: total domination. The Dominion's wrath surged forward, its weapons lighting up the dark expanse of space. The final clash was here, and there would be no holding back. As the Leviathan and the Dominion's wrath collided, the battle became a frenzy of destruction. Orbital bombardments tore through the fabric of the stars, each explosion brighter than the last. Missiles and energy blasts filled the space between the two ships, and the sound of close-quarters combat reverberated through the walls of the Leviathan. In the midst of the chaos, Reeves received a chilling message from the Leviathan's eye. "Captain, I have accessed the Dominion's core. There is a way to destroy their AI, but it will come at a great cost." Reeves' heart skipped a beat. What kind of cost? "If I destroy their core, it will trigger a chain reaction," the AI explained. "The entire galaxy will be caught in the blast. The shockwave will annihilate everything. The war will end, but so will all life within reach of the blast." Reeves felt the weight of the decision pressing down on him. On one hand, destroying the Xylar AI's core would end the war once and for all. The Dominion would be obliterated, their forces broken, their fleet scattered. The humans would win. But the cost, destroying the galaxy itself, was unimaginable. The entire galaxy would be wiped out in the process. The human victory would be hollow, a Pyrrhic one. The galaxy would be a graveyard. He turned to his crew, their faces grim, knowing the weight of the decision they were about to make. They had already lost so much, Bonner and so many others. Would their sacrifices mean nothing if they destroyed everything they fought for? Captain Reeves looked out at the destruction unfolding before him. His mind raced. There had to be another way. He couldn't just accept the AI solution. He couldn't doom the galaxy to total annihilation, even if it meant winning the war. There must be another way, he muttered to himself. He turned to Nira, his voice urgent. "What about their command center? Could we disable it without triggering the destruction?" Nira's eyes widened. "It's risky, Captain. But there's a chance. If we can bypass their primary defense systems, we can infiltrate their core without triggering a galaxy-wide explosion." Reeves didn't hesitate. "Do it. We don't destroy the galaxy. We fight for its future." The crew worked in unison, pushing the Leviathan to its limits. They hacked through the Dominion's defenses, bypassing the AI's algorithms, and infiltrating the command center of the Dominion's wrath. The battle outside was reaching its climax, with both ships firing at point-blank range, the very fabric of space shaking with each explosion. But inside the Leviathan, the crew was focused. Nira, tapping furiously at her console, shouted, "We've got access. We're in." The final moments were a blur of frantic activity as they initiated the shutdown protocol for the Xylar AI's core. The massive warship shuddered under the strain, and for a brief moment, it seemed like the whole world was holding its breath. Then, The Xylar fleet stopped. The Dominion's wrath halted in midair, its weapons powering down. The remaining Xylar ships followed suit. The AI had been deactivated, and the war was over. Captain Reeves collapsed back in his chair, the weight of the decision finally hitting him. They had won, but at what cost? The galaxy was still here. The war was over, but the scars would remain. The crew of the Leviathan had fought not just for survival, but for a future where humanity could thrive. They had made the impossible choice to save the galaxy, not destroy it. And in that final moment, humanity had proven that even against the greatest odds, even when facing destruction, they would never give up. They had won, not just the war, but their place in the stars. The battle was reaching its peak. The Dominion's wrath, the flagship of the Xylar, towered in the distance, its weapons crackling with deadly energy. The Leviathan had fought fiercely, but now, Captain Elias Reeves knew it was time for the final push. The crew had given everything they had, and the end was in sight. This was no longer just about surviving. This was about reclaiming humanity's place in the galaxy. Inside the Leviathan, the tension was palpable. The ship was cloaked, darting through space toward the heart of the enemy flagship. A plan had been devised, a risky, dangerous plan. But it was their only shot at victory. They had to infiltrate the Dominion's wrath and disable its eye once and for all. It was the key to ending the war. "Everyone, you know your roles," Captain Reeves said, his voice steady, though his heart pounded. "We're going to fight like we've never fought before. We're doing this for humanity, for the galaxy." The crew nodded in unison, ready for whatever lay ahead. They had been through countless battles together. But this was the final confrontation. There was no turning back. The Leviathan's cloaking field flickered briefly, and they were close, too close. The Dominion's wrath loomed ahead, the massive warship like a black monolith in space, exuding cold, hostile energy. The human crew's nerves were at their breaking point, but they kept moving forward, knowing that the fate of the galaxy rested on their shoulders. "We're in position," said Lieutenant Nira, her voice calm despite the chaos unfolding around them. "Time to board." A team of elite soldiers, including Captain Reeves and his trusted companion, Sergeant Bonner, gathered at the boarding pods. They were prepared to infiltrate the Dominion's wrath, to fight their way to the heart of the ship, where the Xylar AI's core lay. The pods shot forward, their engines roaring as they closed the distance between the Leviathan and the enemy flagship. With a violent jolt, the pods crashed into the hull of the Dominion's wrath. The crew's hearts raced, but they were ready. They suited up, weapons in hand, and readied themselves for the battle ahead. As they breached the interior of the enemy ship, they were met with a wave of Xylar soldiers, fierce and relentless. The humans fought back with everything they had, using their advanced tactics, their agility, and the element of surprise. Hand-to-hand combat erupted in the cold, metallic halls of the Dominion's wrath. Each blow was a fight for survival, each moment a struggle to hold on to hope. Bonner was at the forefront, his strength unmatched as he took down one Xylar soldier after another. He was determined, focused, and his every action fueled by the need to protect his crew and their future. But as the battle raged on, it became clear that not everyone would make it out alive. A sudden explosion rocked the ship, sending a shockwave through the corridors. Bonner, ever the hero, shielded his comrades, taking the full brunt of the blast. His body crumpled to the ground, his breath ragged as he struggled to stay conscious. "No," Captain Reeves shouted, rushing to his side. "Bonner, stay with me." Bonner looked up at him, a faint smile on his face. This is for the galaxy, Captain. You have to win." With his final breath, Bonner let go, his sacrifice igniting a fire in the hearts of the crew. The human soldiers, their resolve hardened, fought with renewed vigor. They wouldn't let Bonner's sacrifice be in vain. They pressed forward, determined to reach the core and destroy the AI that had caused so much destruction. They fought through the corridors, room after room filled with Xylar soldiers. Each skirmish was more brutal than the last, but the humans had a fire that the Xylar could not extinguish. They were fighting for their survival, for their future, and for the memory of their fallen comrades. Bonner's sacrifice had lit a spark in them all, and nothing could stop them now. At last, they reached the core. The massive chamber was filled with energy, the heart of the Xylar fleet. Captain Reeves and his team planted explosives around the perimeter, working quickly and efficiently. They had only minutes before the Dominion's wrath would activate its self-destruct sequence and wipe them all out. "We're almost there," said Lieutenant Nira, her voice a mix of determination and fear. "We can do this." The seconds ticked away, and the tension in the air was suffocating. As the final explosive was set in place, the AI's voice echoed through the room. It was cold and mechanical, as if it had known this moment would come. "Foolish humans," the Xylar AI's voice boomed. "You are nothing. You cannot defeat me. I am the future of this galaxy." Captain Reeves stood tall, his eyes locked on the core. "You may have been the future," he said, his voice steady, "but now it's humanity's turn." With a final push, they activated the detonators. The room shook violently as the explosives detonated, sending a shockwave through the entire ship. The core of the Dominion's wrath was shattered, its systems fried beyond repair. The Xylar fleet, without their command, faltered. Their ships, once unstoppable, drifted aimlessly through space, powerless and defeated. As the crew of the Leviathan made their way back to their ship, the full weight of their victory began to sink in. They had done it. Against all odds, they had destroyed the Dominion's AI, disabled the Xylar fleet, and won the war. The galaxy, once teetering on the edge of destruction, was now safe. Back on the Leviathan, Captain Reeves stood at the observation deck, staring out into the stars. The dust had settled. The battle was over. But the war for humanity's future was only just beginning. The galaxy was not the same place it had once been. The Galactic Coalition, once divided by fear and mistrust, was now united under humanity's banner. They had shown the galaxy that humanity was not to be underestimated. They had reminded the galaxy that human ingenuity, resilience, and courage could overcome even the most impossible odds. "We've done it," Lieutenant Nira said, her voice filled with awe as she joined Captain Reeves on the deck. "We've won," he replied, a hint of a smile on his face, "and we will lead the galaxy into an era of peace and prosperity." The crew gathered around him, their faces a mix of exhaustion and pride. They had fought together, and now they would rebuild the galaxy together. Humanity's legacy had been restored. They had proven that even in the darkest of times, hope could still shine through. And with that, they set their sights on the future, ready to lead the galaxy into a new era, one of peace, unity, and prosperity. Humanity had triumphed, and the stars would forever bear witness to their victory.